It was the middle of the afternoon, and Sebastian had me pinned against the back of the love seat with his mouth on my neck, and I was not thinking about anything in the world except where I could put my hands. I should start there, because that is where it started. Not with a warning. Not with a bad feeling. Not with some little voice in my head telling me we were about to have a moment that changes the temperature of a room forever. It started with the best kind of afternoon. The blinds were half open. The apartment was full of that soft, lazy daylight, and we had nothing urgent to do. Nowhere to be. No one to perform for. And for once, I was not pretending any of this was an accident. Sebastian had walked past me in the living room and hooked 2 fingers into the waistband of my shorts like he owned the right to pull me close. And God help me, by then he did. I went easy. Too easy. Like I had been waiting all day for the excuse. He smiled when I came to him. That slow, mischievous smile he got when he knew exactly what he was doing to me. Then his mouth was on mine, and whatever half-formed sentence I had been about to say disappeared somewhere between his hands, finding my hips and my back hitting the couch. There are men who kiss like they are asking. Sebastian kissed like he already knew the answer and still wanted to hear me give it. His hands slid under my shirt, warm against my skin, and I made a sound I would have denied under oath if anyone had asked me later. He heard it. Of course he heard it. Sebastian noticed everything. That was one of the problems with being wanted by a man who paid attention. Nothing stayed secret for long. Not the way my breath caught when his thumb moved over my ribs. Not the way my hands went to his shoulders and held on. Not the way I tilted my head without meaning to when his mouth found the right places. He laughed softly against my skin. I got one hand in his hair and tugged, not hard, just enough to make him look at me. His eyes were dark and amused and hungry in a way that still made some old frightened part of me want to look away. But I did not. That was the new thing. I looked right back at him in the middle of the day, with the blinds open and the room full of light, and I let him see that I wanted him. All of it. No joke, no excuse, no door left open so I could pretend I had not meant anything by it. Sebastian saw it land on me, the freedom of that, and something in his face changed. The teasing softened. The heat did not. If anything, it got worse. He kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, like he was rewarding me for staying. His hands moved with the kind of confidence that still knocked me loose from myself. They knew me now. That was the thing. They knew where I was ticklish and where I was not, where I would laugh and where I would go quiet, where I would pretend I could handle him and where my whole body would give me away. I had spent so long being afraid of being known. Now Sebastian knew me, and I kept letting him. My shirt came off somewhere near the couch. His followed a second later because I had learned to be useful. He made this pleased little sound when my hands found his skin, and that sound did something reckless to me. I pulled him closer, close enough that there was no polite version of what we were doing left. His chest was warm against mine. His mouth was at my jaw. His hand was at the small of my back, pressing me into him like he had no intention of letting the afternoon stay innocent. And it was not innocent. It had not been innocent from the second he hooked his fingers into my waistband, and I went to him like I belonged there. We were laughing a little at first, because daylight made us brave and stupid in a way the dark never had. He backed me toward the hallway, and I bumped into the side table hard enough to rattle the lamp, and he caught it with one hand without ever really taking his mouth off me. I told him he was going to break something. He said, breathless, that I should stop distracting him. I told him he was the distraction. He looked at me then, really looked, and the laughter went out of the room in the best way. The walk to the bedroom was not graceful. It was hands and heat and stopping too many times because one of us would get distracted by the other. It was Sebastian pressing me briefly against the hallway wall like he could not wait 5 more steps. It was me getting my hands at his waist and pulling him back when he tried to move us along. It was shirts already gone and skin warm from the afternoon, and both of us smiling like fools because we were finally allowed to want each other where the light could reach us. By the time we made it to the bedroom, there was nothing careful left, nothing distant, nothing hidden. He pushed the door, mostly closed with his foot, not locked, not even fully shut, because neither Ophis was thinking that far ahead. We were thinking about the bed, about each other, about the fact that he had his hands on me and I had mine on him and nobody was flinching anymore. I went down first, pulling him with me, and he came willingly, one knee on the mattress, then both, his body settling over mine with a weight that made the whole room narrow down to him. Sebastian above me in the afternoon light. Sebastian with his mouth swollen from mine. Sebastian looking at me like I was not a secret, not a mistake, not a thing that could only happen after midnight. I touched his face, because I could. He turned his head and kissed my palm. That almost undid me more than everything else. Because the heat was there, obviously. The want. the ache of him close and warm and real. But underneath, it was something softer, something I had not known how badly I needed until he kept giving it to me. He was not just taking me apart. He was staying with me while it happened. I said his name. It came out rougher than I meant it to. He smiled like that was exactly what he had been trying to earn, and then his mouth was on mine again, and the room disappeared in pieces. The bed under us, the sunlight across the floor, his hand sliding along my side, my fingers pressing into his back, the sound he made when I moved against him, the sound I made when he answered. This was the new thing, the thing two whole parts of this story had been building toward. Me, in the light, with the man I wanted, holding nothing back, keeping nothing in reserve. And for one perfect, reckless stretch of afternoon, I forgot there was a world outside that room at all. That is the part that guts me now. For as long as Sebastian and I had been anything, even after I stopped hiding it from myself, some small piece of me had never fully let go while he touched me. Some part of me always stayed half back, half braced, keeping a little distance between myself and the moment in case I needed it, the way a man does when he has spent his whole life making sure he is never caught being who he is. That afternoon was the first time I had ever set the whole of myself down. No part of me standing guard, no part of me held in reserve. The one afternoon I let myself be completely his, completely present, completely unguarded, was the exact afternoon that changed our relationship. So I did not hear the key go in the front door lock. We did not hear the lock turn and the door open, and I did not hear the footsteps. And the first thing that reached me through the haze of Sebastian and the warm dark behind my own eyes was Sebastian himself going rigid against me. That is the thing I keep coming back to. I did not know yet that anything was wrong, but his body knew. He went still under me, and then white, and then braced in a way I had never felt from him, not on the worst of our nights, not even when he was furious with me, and I lifted my head to ask what was wrong and followed his eyes to the bedroom door. There was a man standing in it. I want to be clear about the order of what I felt, because it matters. The first thing was not fear. The first thing, after the half second of pure shock, was fury. There was a stranger standing in the doorway of the room where the man I loved, and I had just gone as far as two people can go. A stranger who had walked into our home uninvited, and every instinct I have ever had came up at once, and they were not gentle instincts. I am not the kind of man who covers up and waits to see what happens. I never have been. Words are the thing I cannot do. This, my body knew exactly how to do. I came up off that bed without a thought for the fact that I had nothing on, planted myself between this man and Sebastian, and went straight at him, because there was an intruder in our apartment and I was going to put him back out of it. I did not care that I was naked. I did not care who he was. I cared that he was standing where he had no right to stand, and I was already moving to do something about it. Hudson, stop. Sebastian's voice came out cracked and fast, and there was something in it I had never heard before, something close to dread. Stop. It's Roman. The name meant nothing to me. That is the thing I have to make you understand. I stood there in the middle of my own bedroom, naked, fists half up, every muscle still loaded to throw this man down the stairs, and the name landed on me like a word in a language I did not speak. Roman. I did not know a Roman. I looked back at Sebastian, at the way the name had drained the color out of him, and then back at the stranger, and I said the only thing anyone would say in this situation, which was, "Who the hell is Roman?" "Oh," he said, and stuck his hand out. "How rude of me. I'm Roman, and you must be the replacement." I did not take his hand. I grabbed the sheet off the bed instead and got it around myself, because there is a limit to how much of this I was going to do with nothing on, and I said, "I don't give a shit who you are." "Get the fuck out," Roman said, looking at Sebastian. "I'll just wait out here on the couch. I bought you when we took that trip 2 summers ago." He stepped back out the door, leaving it open behind him. And then it was just Sebastian and me, and I turned on him. And I want to be honest about what was in my voice, because it was not kind, and a part of me knew even then that it was not entirely his fault. But it was there. Because here is what was actually happening to me underneath the anger, and I think anyone would feel it. I was standing in my own bedroom, wrapped in a sheet, having just been seen at my most exposed by a complete stranger, a stranger who had walked in with a key, a stranger whose name had turned the man I loved to paper. And the thing that was suddenly, blindingly clear was that there was an entire chapter of Sebastian's life, a chapter big enough to still have its own key, that he had never once told me about. You cannot be betrayed by a stranger. So the anger did not go toward Roman. It went straight at the person who had the answers, who had clearly been holding all of this back, who had let me get blindsided and humiliated in my own home. And under the anger was the part that made me want to be anywhere else. I had finally set the whole of myself down an hour ago, and it turned out I had done it next to a locked door I did not even know was there. Sebastian. I kept my eyes on him. Who the fuck is this? Why does he have a key? Give me one good reason I shouldn't kick his ass and then get my shit and leave. I was already reaching for my clothes off the floor as I said it, already pulling them on, already doing the thing a man does when every cell in his body is telling him to get out of the room. And Sebastian opened his mouth, the man who has a word for every feeling there is. And for the first time since I had known him, nothing came out at all. Nobody sat down. I want to be clear about that, because of how it went later. The cozy version some part of me almost wishes had happened. There was no sitting. There was a stranger in our front room, and the temperature in the apartment had dropped about 40 degrees, and the three of us stood there in it like animals deciding who was going to move first. Sebastian moved first. He came out of the bedroom with his shirt back on and his voice gone flat and hard in a way I had never heard from him. What the hell are you doing here? I told you never to come back. I was in the neighborhood. Roman said it easy, like the answer to a pleasant question. And you told me when I left I need to come get the last of my things. So, he spread his hands, the picture of a reasonable man being yelled at for no reason. That was a year ago, Roman. You should have called. Sebastian's jaw was tight. You do not just walk into someone's home. You do not still have a. And he stopped, and I watched the word key arrive on his face, and watched him decide not to say it out loud, file it away as one more thing gone wrong, and that was the first I understood that this man had never given the key back and Sebastian had never made him. A year. Roman tasted the word and smiled. Has it been a year? Doesn't feel like it. He let his eyes drift around the apartment, taking inventory, landing nowhere by accident. Place looks just the same. You never did like change. Sebastian did not take the bait. Stay right there. I'll get your box. And he turned and went down the hall to his own room, to the closet to get it. And that, I understand now, was exactly the opening Roman had been waiting for, because the second Sebastian was out of the room, Roman turned the whole of his attention on me. It was like a light being swung around. He looked at me for the first time as a person and not a piece of furniture, head to toe, taking my measure, and he smiled like we were old friends. So, he said, warm, conspiratorial, "You're the new one. How long has this been going on? What do you do? Has he told you about? You can kiss my ass," I said, "and you can do it on your way out the door. You're not going to be around long enough to know one thing about me." He did not get angry. He just looked delighted, like I had confirmed something for him, and he leaned in a little, dropping his voice so it would not carry down the hall, just for me. "You know what I think is sweet?" he said. "After all this time, he still has my things. Boxed up. Kept. A whole year." He tilted his head. I never did figure he could fully let me go. A man doesn't hold onto a box for a year if he's really done with what's in it. And God help me, it worked in the half second before I could stop it. The box. Kept for a year. I felt the poison go in exactly where he had aimed it, and I hated that it found a soft place. And I hated worse that I had no answer for it, because I did not yet know Theta Box kept for a year can also mean a wound a man cannot make himself reopen long enough to throw away. Just then Sebastian came back into the room with the box. He crossed straight to Roman and shoved it into his chest, hard, so the man had to catch it or wear it, and he said the steadiest, coldest thing I had heard him say all day. "Get out." The floor dropped out from under me right there in that hallway, with Roman's poison still in my ear and Sebastian crossing the room with the box, and it had nothing to do with anything Roman had said to me directly. It came from watching how he had done it. It was in how he did it. Even in those few minutes, you could see the whole method of the man, the way he could make a person small while smiling at them, the way he made cruelty sound like fondness, the way the thing about the box was designed to keep Sebastian on a leash from across the room. And I heard, underneath all of it, the description Sebastian had once given me of the man who taught him toe brace for the exits, the man he spent 2 years not being enough for, the man who kept him in a drawer and let him believe the drawer was love. And I thought, with a sickness I have never felt before or since, I have been doing a gentler version of this the whole time. The careful mornings. The daylight distance. The rule, my rule, that it could only happen at night. The way I had filed our first night away before Sebastian even woke. Every single thing I had done to keep myself safe had been a softer brick in the same wall this man had built. I had told myself I was different because I was scared and not cruel, because my hiding came from fear and his came from contempt. But here's the thing no one tells you. Sebastian had not experienced my fear as fear. He could not see the inside of me. He could only see the behavior, And the behavior was a man keeping him in the dark, a man who would touch him at night and go cold in the morning, a man who put him back in the drawer and called it being careful. I had been hurting him in the exact shape of his oldest wound. I had been a Kinder Roman, and a Kinder Roman is still a Roman to the man kept in the dark. I should tell you that this realization made me stand up and fight. It is what a better man would have done, what Sebastian would have done if our places were swapped. Instead, it did the opposite. It paralyzed me. Because if I was just a gentler version of this man, then maybe the kindest thing I could do, the one genuinely loving act left available to me, was to get out of the way and let Sebastian go back to the devil he at least understood. Roman did not even have to push me toward that thought. I walked there on my own 2 feet. He just watched me arrive. And I think, looking back, that watching me get there wasted the part he enjoyed most of all. He took his time about it, the way he took his time about everything, looking at the box and then at Sebastian and then, last, at me, with that same delighted little smile. But he went, box under his arm, and the door closed behind him, and the apartment was suddenly far too quiet. And in the whole scramble of getting him out of there, with my head roaring and my hands shaking and every part of me just wanting that man gone from our home, not one of us thought about the key. It did not cross my mind. I was so desperate to have him out the door that the small practical thing, the thing that would have mattered most, never occurred to me. I will be paying for that for a long time. Then Sebastian turned to me, and he asked me to stay. Not to talk. Not yet. Just to stay and let him explain, and I could see him bracing for me to say no, bracing the way a man braces who has already decided he will not be allowed to keep the good thing. So he explained. Not all of it. I think there are pieces of those 2 years he may never be able to hand to anyone, and I did not push for them, but he gave me the shape of it. Roman was the man, the one I had built out of the things Sebastian would not say. 2 years of being kept, of being a secret, of being told in 100 small ways that he was something to be enjoyed in private and put away in company. The drawer was Roman's drawer. The closed door Sebastian had promised himself he would die before standing behind again was a door Roman had shut on him more times than he could count. And the reason Sebastian had never told me, the reason he had stepped around those years like a hole in the floor, was not that they did not matter. It was that they mattered so much he could not find a way to set them down in front of me without being afraid I would see the shape of the man who had let himself be treated that way and want less of him for it. I understood it. I want to be honest and say that I understood every word of it, because I am a man who has spent his whole life not saying the thing that mattered most for fear of what it would cost. If anyone on this earth should have been able to forgive Sebastian for keeping a wound to himself, it was me. And still, there is a difference between understanding a thing and being able to feel it stop hurting, and I could not get there that night. Because underneath the understanding was the simple, childish, unkillable fact that the man I had handed all of myself to had a whole room in his life that I had walked past for months without knowing it was there. I had been so completely his. And he had not been completely mine, not in the way I had believed. And finding that out in front of a stranger who had a key was a humiliation I did not know how to put down. So we slept apart that night. He did not ask me not to, which was good because honestly, I wasn't sure at that moment if I was staying, leaving, with him anymore or what. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over an apartment when two people who usually sleep tangled together lie awake in separate rooms, both of them staring at the same ceiling from different sides of a wall. Neither of them able to cross the hall. I lay there feeling lied to, and being unfair about it, and knowing I was being unfair, and not being able to stop. And on the other side of the wall, I know now, Sebastian lay there deciding he had ruined the one good thing he had let himself have, and starting, already, to plan how he might fix it. Here is the part I have had to make myself tell straight, because it is the part that ended us, at least for now, at least as far as I know, standing where I stand telling you this. And it happened the very next morning, and it happened because Sebastian was trying to fix it. I did not know that yet. I woke up alone on the love seat, because I had nowhere else I could stand to be. I did not want to sleep in Sebastian's bed, not after that. And I could not go back to my own room, the one I had moved into all those months ago as nothing more than the roommate, because crawling back in there felt like crawling all the way back to the beginning, back to being Thayman who lived down the hall and meant nothing, and I would rather have slept on the floor than admit we had landed there again. I certainly was not going to sleep on the couch that was a gift from that prick Roman, so the love seat it was. Sick at heart, the fight from the night before sitting on my chest like a weight, I found a note on the kitchen counter in Sebastian's handwriting. He had gone out, it said. He would be back soon. There was a little drawing of a coffee cup, the kind of small, foolish thing he did when he was trying to say something his pride would not let him say out loud. What I know now, What I did not know then is that he had gotten up before me and slipped out to the place across town that makes the breakfast I love, the one I had mentioned exactly once, months ago, and he had remembered. He had gone to bring me back a peace offering with his own 2 hands, because he did not have the words either, and this was the only language he had left. So I thought I was alone. That is the thing that matters. I thought I had the apartment to myself, with Sebastian gone and a note on the counter, and I did the most ordinary thing in the world. I went and took a shower. I came out of the steam, wet, naked, and began the walk down the hall to my room the way I had walked through my own home my entire life, and for the second time in 2 days, this shit was scared out of me. The son of a bitch was back. Roman. He had let himself in. He had the key nobody had thought to take back, and he had used it, and he was sitting there comfortable as anything, like he had been waiting, and he looked up at me, dripping and bare, and stopped dead in the hallway, and he smiled the way a cat smiles at something small. "Relax," he said, lifting the key and giving it a little shake, pleasant as ever. "I only came to bring this back. Thought I'd do the decent thing." The decent thing. He had timed it. He had watched Sebastian leave, I am sure of it now, and he had picked his moment, and his cover story was the most unanswerable one there is, a man returning a key. Who could be angry at that? If you're smart, you'll leave them and get out. "Sebastian isn't here to save you this time," I said, and I did not wait for an answer. I turned and went for my bedroom, fast, to get a door between us and get some clothes on, because there is nothing that strips a man of his footing like being caught naked by someone who wishes him harm, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but for the second time. And Roman got up and followed me. He came down the hall after me, unhurried, talking the whole way, his voice low and warm and full of poison. "You know I am right. You will do to him what I did. You already are. Do him a favor." He kept pace with me, close, herding me toward my own bedroom door, and I kept moving away from him and telling him to get out, and that is the shape we were in, the 2 of us, when I heard the front door open behind us both. I turned. Sebastian was standing in the doorway with a paper bag of breakfast in his arms, and I watched him see it. I watched him see exactly what Roman had built for him to see. Me, naked, wet from the shower, walking down the hallway toward my bedroom. Roman behind me, close, following. The 2 of us alone in the apartment, headed where 2 people head. It was the precise image, down to the hallway and the bare skin and the man following, of how Sebastian and I had started. He had followed me down this same hall once, drawn after a man who had walked out of a shower without his clothes. He knew what that picture meant because he had lived inside it. And now he was watching it happen again, in his own home, with the villain of his life cast in his own old part. And here is the cruelest thing, the thing I did not understand until later, the thing that tells you exactly what kind of man Roman is. Sebastian did not just see a betrayal. He saw a punishment. I watched it land on his face, the whole terrible logic of it. He had lied to me. He had kept Roman's secret for the length of our love. I had found out, and I had been hurt, and we had slept apart, and now here I was, the morning after, with Roman, in the exact shape of how we began. To Sebastian, it did not look like I had been ambushed. It looked like I was paying him back. It looked like I had decided, in the night, to hurt him the same way he had hurt me, to show him precisely how it felt. Roman had not just framed me. He had handed Sebastian a story in which the betrayal was deserved, which is the one kind of betrayal a man like Sebastian will not fight, because some part of him has been waiting his whole life to be told the bill had finally come due. The bag hit the floor. The coffee he had carried across town for me. The breakfast he had remembered from one offhand thing I said months ago. The small, foolish peace offering he did not have the words to give any other way. All of it went down on the hardwood at his feet, and he did not even look at it. I need you to understand what I was actually doing in that hallway, because Sebastian could not see it, and the camera in his head will have lied to him for the rest of his life if I do not say it plainly. I was running away. I was a man fleeing a predator toward the nearest door, trying to put clothes and a wall between myself and someone I could not stand. There was no part of me, not one cell, that wanted what that picture suggested. Roman knew that. Roman had counted on it, looking like the opposite. He had not laid a hand on me. He did not need to. He had simply arranged himself behind me in a hallway, on the one morning Sebastian's guilt would make the worst reading the easiest one, and let 2 men's oldest fears do all his work for him. That is the thing I understand now that I did not then. He was never only playing me, and he was never only playing Sebastian. He was playing us against each other, each of us holding the exact piece of guilt the other one's silence would mistake for proof. And here's where my lifelong curse cost me everything. Because in the 1 second it would have taken to cross that hallway and reach for Sebastian and say, "No, look at me. This is not what it is. He came in here on Hudson. I am running from him, not to him. The words jammed in my throat exactly the way they always have. I stood there, wet and bare and silent. The man who has never once been able to say the necessary thing out loud in the daylight. And I let the silence speak for me. And the silence, to a man already certain he was being punished, said yes. It said everything he was afraid of. It said you were right to expect this. Roman, behind me, said the only thing he needed to say. He set the key down on the little table by the door, gentle, like a gentleman, the decent thing done. And then, on his way past Sebastian and out, he said it, soft and warm and aimed at no one and both of us at once. See you around. To this day, I do not know which of us he was talking to. I do not know if it was a goodbye to the man he had kept for 2 years or a promise to the man he had just ruined. I think he wanted it that way. I think leaving us both unsure was the last and best thing he did to us. And then he was gone, and his key was on the table, and you would think that would mean it was over, that with the key returned and theming out the door, we were finally free of him. But that is not how it felt, standing there in the wreckage, and it is not how it has felt since. Because the key being back did not make either of us believe he was really gone. And the truth he left scattered on our floor with that dropped breakfast was so much worse than a key. Sebastian did not trust me anymore. He thought I had done the cruelest thing a person can do to him, on purpose, to make a point. And I was still standing there nursing my own wound, still feeling lied to, still unable to fully forgive the locked room I had not known was there, so that even as I lost him, I could not put my own hurt down long enough to chase him. And Sebastian turned around and walked away. And this time I did not know. I do not know, even now, whether he was walking away for the night or for good. He did not yell. I almost wish he had. I would give a great deal for a version of that morning where Sebastian shouted at me, threw the bag at my head, made me chase him down the stairs, because all of those are things a man does when there is still something left to fight over. He did none of them. He just looked at me with a quiet I had never seen on him before, a final kind of quiet, and he stepped over the breakfast he had carried across town for me, and he was gone, and I was left standing in a hallway with a stranger's key on the table and the smell of coffee soaking into the floor. And the worst of it, the thing that has kept me up every night since, is that I could have stopped all of it with a single sentence, and I did not. Roman built the trap, yes. But Roman could not have made it work on a man who would simply open his mouth and tell the truth out loud. The trap only worked because it was built for me, for the one man it was guaranteed to catch. The man who has never in his life been able to say the necessary thing when the lights are on. I stood in the wreckage of the best thing in my life, and I could not make a sound. This is the part where I have to tell you the truth about myself. The truth this whole story has been circling from the first sentence. Every time it has mattered, every single time, I have been a man who could not speak. I could reach for Sebastian in the dark. I could give him everything with my hands and my body and all the parts of me that do not require words. And I did. I held nothing back in the dark, not once. But the moment the lights came up and a sentence was required of me, an honest sentence, out loud, where it could be heard and held against me, I have failed him every time. I failed him that first afternoon, when I let the silence answer for me. I failed him with the rules. I failed him every time he asked me, with his eyes if not his mouth, to just once say the thing in the light. And I failed him in that hallway, in the 1 second that would have cost me nothing but my pride and would have saved me everything I have ever wanted. I am telling you this because I finally understand what the silence costs, and I did not understand it until I had paid the whole bill at once. I spent months thinking my silence was protecting me, keeping me safe, holding the door shut against a flood. Standing in that apartment, listening to the man I loved decide that I was just another Roman with better manners, I understood that my silence has never once protected me from anything. It has only ever cost me the exact thing I was most afraid of losing. The wall I built to keep from getting hurt was the thing that was hurting him, and the drawer I kept us in to feel safe was the same drawer that taught him, long ago, that he was disposable. Roman walked in with a key and called me the replacement, as if Sebastian were the one who could be swapped out. And the cruelest part is that I had spent months making that true, not for me, for him. I had treated Sebastian like a thing that lived in the dark. I had never once stood up in the daylight and said the single true sentence that would have made a liar out of every word that man said. Roman did not invent the lie. He just found it already half-built, by me, and moved in. I have told you this whole thing for one reason. I was the only one who saw it. I am the only person alive who knows what really happened in that hallway, that I was running and not reaching, that the man behind me was a stranger I could not stand and not a lover I was sneaking back to. I picked up the words to tell it because somebody had to, because the truth deserved at least one person willing to say it out loud, even if the only place I could manage to say it was here, to you, in the dark, where it is easy. And I thought, telling it, that if I could just get the words out once, even like this, even to no one, I might find the nerve to carry them across town and say them to him. That was the plan. Say it here first, in practice, and then say it to Sebastian for real, in the daylight, and tear the whole lie down with one true sentence. But I can feel it closing back over me, even now, even here. The old silence. The thing I have never once in my life been able to beat. I sat down to tell you how I was going to find the words, and instead I can feel the words going, the way they always go, right when they matter most. I do not even want to tell this story anymore. I do not know how it ends. I am not sure anymore that I am the one who gets to tell it. I am the man who could not speak in the daylight, and it turns out I cannot even finish telling you about it without the door swinging shut in my throat again. So I am going to do the only thing left that I know how to do. I am going to hand it back. If you want to know whether we made it, whether I found the words in time, whether the man I love ever learned the truth about that hallway, you are going to have to hear the rest of it from Sebastian. He always was the one with the words. He always was the stronger one. He was the one who could stand in the middle of a feeling and say it out loud while it was still happening to him, the thing I have never once managed to do. So I am going to be quiet now, the way I always end up quiet, and I am going to trust him to come back and finish what I could not.